15% of the American people depend on this program for nutrition. And 10% of that funding goes to soda, goes to sugary drinks. 70% goes to processed foods. Diabetes now, prediabetes among children is 25%. This used to be called adult onset diabetes. Doctor that treats diabetes didn't see one child their entire career who had diabetes a generation ago. Now it's very common. I was sitting in a room with the NAACP and Coke executives, and it was very unsettling. It was Coke executives telling the most prominent civil rights groups in the United States, we're going to pay you millions of dollars, and we need you to call our opponents racist to shut down the debate. And the opponents in this case were parents that were concerned about their kids eating too much sugar. And that happened. It was reported in the New York Times at the time in 2012. There was an onslaught against opponents of taking soda out of food stamps around really toxic racial lines, which did shut down the debate, and they were successful. There'd be an exchange of funds, and then the Heritage Foundation would do PR and studies saying how we've got to keep these kids having their Coke. I was shocked that public relations executives in Washington, D.C. are creating lists of what universities to fund and what the research should say. And we're talking prominent research institutions. Processed food companies spend 11 times more on fundamental nutrition research than the NIH. And I can tell you that is not out of philanthropic goodwill to advance unbiased scholarship on nutrition. When companies pay billions of dollars, they want something, and they're getting something. The foundational research for the food pyramid in the 90s that we know is disastrous was Harvard research funded by sugar companies. Up until today, where you have processed food companies funding foundational research, like this recent food compass from Tufts and the NIH, that's saying, and there's some ridiculous, absurd headlines here, but it is saying Lucky Charms are healthier than eggs and things like that, and systemically overrating processed food. And that would be funny if this wasn't going directly into childhood nutrition policy and wrecking the cells of our children. So I felt the need to speak out.
Annotated and summarized, easy to share with loved ones. The description below the title for this video has these summary points.
I think the American patient, the American parent has been gaslighted to not ask questions. This idea of trusting the science, this idea that you're a fringe wacko for trying to self-diagnose or go outside of our traditional medical system. But at the same time, we've been getting exponentially sicker, more depressed, more infertile. I mean, male sperm counts plummeting, PCOS, leading cause of infertility, is going up. When the American Academy of Pediatrics now is saying that 12-year-olds who are obese, which is 25% of teenagers, should be getting an injection instead of eating healthy. I mean, I think there's a license now that people can kind of wake up and question incentives, and that seems to be resonating. It's absolute disaster. An average child today, in one 20-ounce bottle of Coke, ingests as much sugar as they did in a year, just 100 years ago. Obvious. I don't think anyone's really scientifically disagreeing. Shouldn't be subsidized in a nutrition program, but it's a material part of Coke's revenue. Again, over $10 billion of food stamp money is spent on these sugary drinks. I'm a free market guy. Coke should exist. Pharma should exist. Like, they should even be trying to rig the system if they can, but we've got to call it out. I'm not saying they shouldn't exist, but the fact is the incentives of the $4 trillion healthcare system, the $6 trillion food system, is to grow.
Yeah.
And it's no one person, but I think the beauty of the system in a way is that it's convinced everyone they're doing the right thing. So the Coke executives really do legitimately feel, many of them, like they're feeding people. And the pharma executives really do feel like they're helping people. You know, if somebody is like, massively obese, diabetic, like really on the verge of heart, they probably do need a drug. The problem is the link. The problem is that the food companies, aren't responsible for health. They've made food more addictive. The foundation of our diet is highly processed grains, which turns into sugar, which is addictive, which was created just 100 years ago. Seed oils, which are inflammatory, make the food more addictive, invented just 100 years ago, and added sugar, which really didn't exist 100 years ago. The problem is then the pharma and the hospitals and all these other institutions, they're there to pick up the mess. They're not taking responsibility for the fact that everyone's getting sicker. So they're like, oh, we're doing a great, because there's these lazy humans are eating their McDonald's, their processed food, and we're cleaning up the mess. So they in their heads, but the problem is nobody's asking why people are getting sick. Like there's no incentive. Yeah, so that's one of the problems, and that's why it's important. I think people are waking up, the books, podcasts, people wearing biowearables and seeing things that aren't making sense. There is a knowledge that things aren't working. Actually, if you look at the medical profession, it's one of the highest burnout, dropout rates. It's one of the highest suicide rates, unfortunately. It's one of the highest rates of depression. They think that the American people are lazy. They think that they're going to eat terrible things and they're there to clean up the mess. That's such a convenient way to think. When there's trillions of dollars of, there's tens of billions of dollars of farm subsidies subsidizing sugar and processed grains, where healthcare only kicks in once you get sick, which is lobbied for by pharma, where we're getting completely ridiculous nutritional guidelines to eat Lucky Charms instead of beef. People are overweight, clearly like diabetic, but I don't think people want that to be the case. I really do think it's like a very rigged system, and it's just so, in a way, evil to just wash your hands of it and say, well, this is what's going to happen. We're going to prescribe our drugs. We're going to do our, it's like we've got to ask why people are sick, but somebody's got to be asking questions. And in my opinion, that should be the medical system. I like this is a crazy concept, but the foundation of medical, a medical institution like a hospital or public health institution should be how to keep people healthy. There's not a single institution asking why people are getting sick. If you ask a doctor who studies diabetes, they graduated from Harvard, I've done it. What's the underlying cause of diabetes? They literally can't explain the metabolic aspects. They see diabetes as a one-off condition. Diabetes is the foundation of what makes us sick. It's literally a cellular dysregulation. 50% of the country's pre-diabetic or diabetic, 93% has an indicator of metabolic dysfunction. Like our cells are malfunctioning. The American Diabetes Association credentials like doctors who treat diabetes. They can revoke the license. These are not like fringe organizations. The American Academy of Pediatrics credentials pediatricians, and they provide the guidance that if you go outside that guidance, you are at risk of losing your license. Like it is the gold standard. It's also like absolutely the unimpeachable advice for parents, right? And they accept food and pharma money. The American Academy of Pediatrics, it's right on the website. It's 90% funded by pharma, and they've accepted food money. And the American Diabetes Association has accepted millions of dollars from Coke, Cadbury, many other processed food companies. Until 2018, the official guidance of the American Diabetes Association was that as long as you took your insulin, you could eat whatever you want. Like literally whatever you want. You did not even need to limit your sugar intake. And what is so crazy about that is that if you're eating these inflammatory processed foods where sugar is going into your mitochondria at a rate 100 to 150x what it did 100 years ago, and it's being kicked out and turning into fat and being turned into diabetes is one problem. But like if you're not managing what you're putting in your body, you're going to have other issues, which is why there's all these comorbidities. And then the American Heart Association is even worse. Millions and millions of dollars to this day funded by food companies, by processed food companies. So you basically have these institutions that literally credential and make the paradigm of what doctors are supposed to follow being funded by food companies.